right, we were on your list for a while. We finally got through.
You two have been on my list for a long while, but yeah, go ahead.
Finally got through. We were behind Big Cat and PFT. We finally made it and got you on. And we're in our new studio, which is a lot of fun. This place
cool.
looks pretty cool.
It's definitely cool.
It's a lot different than my couch in Washington, D.C. in a studio.
What about the curtains that I had in the back?
You guys were classic, I'm telling you. So that's the reason I did wear shorts down here. I was like, I don't care about those guys. I've seen their house. I've seen their curtains. I've seen them hanging out, doing nothing. Now I need
we
you
both
two
wore
genius.
collared shirts for once. And,
Oh, you guys, you're doing that just because I'm here, I know. But our new project is to figure out what we're putting behind Eric over here.
We should have a like a competition. You know,
Yeah.
some viewers
That'd be good.
could put some
That'd be
suggestions
good.
in there.
I would like to have a bar. I think a bar, it kind of fits our guys who are all
I don't know, but
slightly
Steven Sam
at all times.
maybe not Steve and Sam.
Yeah,
but
Steve and Sam,
sure,
maybe
Mike and Austin could do their pod like concurring, right there.
Those two would be lying on
Yeah.
the bar. Yes, they would be.
Would we need to find a bartender?
That's a good idea.
That could be a new position.
It could be like Mike Shanahan one day.
Yes.
Could be,
That's good.
who's the celebrity bartender?
The celebrity
this week,
bartender.
right?
Serving up pre-snap motion, the drink.
Yeah.
I like that.
That'd be pretty
good.
cool. So what have you been up to? Tell us about your off season so
Oh
far.
man, this has been. I went to Australia and New Zealand right when the season was over, and we were over there, and the pandemic, of course, started attacking the world. But over there, it was never bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't huge news, but you knew from reading online what was going on other places. But we got out of there. We were there for a month, and we got out of there like just in time. I mean, just as people were starting to put travel restrictions and which country you could come from and go to, and all the different things. So it was wild. But I love Australia. I'd been there a few times before, but New Zealand's off the charts. I'm just telling you. If you got to go. Drew Esikoff is the one that always, our director for Sunday Night Football, is always the one who told me, he goes, I could live there. My plan is I'm going to retire in New Zealand. I was like, get that. What are you talking about? You're not going to move to New Zealand. And I went over there, and I just loved it. Some of the most beautiful golf courses I'd ever seen. I always say this backwards. Queenstown, Queensland, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Queenstown, I think, down on one end of it, of the country, is like the youngest, hippest. There's people my age there for sure, but everything is jumping off this cliff and going on this speed thing that goes around in the circles, and instead of having like little boats that putter around in the thing, they're submarines. So you get them and you jump and you go underwater for 15 seconds and you go.
George is hang gliding. somewhere.
Everything is an adventure sport in New Zealand. I mean, it was just so much fun. We did the whole thing. I jumped off a building, like a
Really? Do you have
50-story
video
building.
evidence of this?
Oh yeah.
Wow, we got to show that.
When you became a grandfather as well again.
Yeah, number two. That's what I was doing all morning this morning, and there's real value in that grandparenting thing. I love it. I'm pretty good at it too. I actually have a picture. I should hold on. I'll get it up. I got spit up on my pants. I got proof.
Have you been indoctrinating the grandchildren into the preparation for Sunday Night Football process? Now that you're at home,
Yeah, I
you've
kick
got
their
them
little
with you.
butts out of my office. That's what I do. Otherwise, I got no chance. I mean, I that's what I'd rather do, right? I'm just having a blast.
Yeah.
I'm having so much fun.
There's something deeply fun about having all the fun and none of the real
Right.
responsibility.
This is what being a grandparent is. So you get them and you just utterly destroy everything in sight.
Yeah.
You pull out every toy. You bring it out there, every doll that any of my daughters have ever owned, and we're down in the basement, and they're everywhere. So that's what I do now.
That's the thing that I remember from. I obviously have no children, but when I was a kid, my sisters would literally get every toy out. It was like a daily ritual.
Yeah.
There was no like, oh, we'll keep this section away for today. No, it was every day we're gonna bring every single thing out, and then we have to clean every single thing up. And now as an adult, if I get one thing out and I leave it out, I feel like a kind of a scam. So how times have changed.
You'll get over it.
Yeah,
Wait
eventually.
till you start having kids.
Eventually. I want to talk about the college football stuff because it just broke, and everyone's trying to untangle it. What are your takeaways? What are your thoughts? What do you think happens?
I love college football, so I think we're all a little saddened by it. So much of our company is built around, when I first came into the company and bought the company, it was NFL football. And so I asked Neil Hornsby, I said, could we do college football? And he goes, Neil, yeah, sure, no worries. And I said, well, how many more people would I have to hire to do that? He goes, we got it covered. I think we had 60 people working. Now we got 500, right? So give you some idea what it took to do college football. But for me personally, I don't get to watch that much college football during the season because we're busy, right? Yeah. You've been there on the weekend and you know what it's like. And so I would it be okay with me if they moved to the spring? It'd be really okay with me. Now you'd lose some of the top players because they'd move on to the draft and there are issues out of it. So I really feel for the student athletes because this window of opportunity where they get to play for the University of Florida or Notre Dame or whatever is so small and it's so fantastic. And it's probably some of my best football memories of my life is taking the field for your university. And to have that stolen away, I really feel badly for them. But, we all get it. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going on right now. Nobody knows what the danger is. And pro athletes, you go, okay, you can sign off on that and do it if you want. But college athletes, high school athletes, peewee athletes, where do you go?
That's the thing. I mean, we're going to be, as a data company, we're going to be studying the effects of this season forever. I mean, it seems like this is going to be the one sort of outlier where we wonder, okay, 2020 draft, there were no pro days. What does that mean? 2021, maybe half the teams play in the fall, half the teams play in the spring, but we're not, what's the difference between a fall player and a spring player when it comes to playing in the NFL? All these things are nothing, and even the kids that get to play in the spring, it's just not going to be the same. It's not going to, a lot of these guys grew up dreaming about, Michigan versus Ohio State in November. Well, that might just be Michigan, Ohio State in March now, but it's going to be weird and different. But there's going to be a lot to learn, I think, from this as far as the data and everything's just different, and we've had college football for 100 years, and this is going to be like a singular event.
But in some ways, it's different, though, because think about college basketball. How many college basketball players could you name right now off the top of your head?
Man, this is
I'm not sure I can name one
right now.
Right? It's like I kind of couldn't even name one. But it's the universities, and it's to some extent the head coaches that you recognize. Yep. So while there may be a little drop in the top-end quality of play if the Trevor Lawrences don't play in the spring, which, certainly I would understand that. But it's still those universities, those coaches playing against each other. And the fans that go to college football games, it's a ritual. It's a rite, or at least for me it was. I was watching my son, Austin, at Notre Dame or going to SEC games. People, their whole weekend, their whole lives are kind of built around those college football games. And so if it's in the spring, I still think it'll be exciting.
Well, plus you have, here's the thing, the good teams just reload. So
the drop-off isn't that big.
So if Justin Fields isn't playing for Ohio State, okay, that sucks because Justin Fields is awesome, but the guy they bring in is a 5-star. He's the number 2 guy, or number 1 guy.
No one didn't watch
class.
Alabama because Tua was hurt. We all watched Alabama in all their games. There was a small drop-off, but it's still Alabama.
Right.
But I think the big reason, one of the big reasons that they're maybe not going to get it together for the fall is how important having fans in the stands is, whereas the NFL is going to, make do if they have to. And it's an interesting difference between, why can't college figure that out? Why can the NFL figure that out? Does it really just come down to money? Because obviously I think there's a lot of proof that you can keep the players pretty safe, but the fans won't be. And so if I can't have fans, I can't have games.
Well, there's also the students on campus that, that there's uncontrollable factors with college that simply aren't in the NFL. And
but most campuses are going to have kids on there.
Right. What I'm saying, I mean, like it's a lot easier to say, hey, look, you're making, even if you're like a minimum player, you're making $500,000 a year. That's upper 1%. We can ask you to do these number of things and
sure,
give you fines if you don't do it. Like that seems to me fair. College football, it's like, well, what do you really have other than for 1% of you guys, you're going to lose a chance at playing in the NFL if none of this works out. And so I think the NFL is far better contained and probably will get do a good job and get through this. College football, I think the broader pandemic just needs to be more solved before it's simpler. Right? I don't know.
But when I watch the baseball happen, right, and the Marlins
or not happen,
or not happen, right. But so they ended up with 15 people with COVID on it. To me, the keeping yourself isolated should be part of the sport if you're going to play.
If you're a professional.
If you're a professional and you're playing baseball or in the National Football League now, and you don't have the common sense to isolate yourself and protect your teammates, then that should be a loss. That series that they had to forfeit, in my opinion, should be a loss from the standpoint that now you incentivize those teammates to go, listen, asshole, you got to quit going to the bar. Yeah. You just cost us a weekend series, against the Dodgers over here. So at least you would add motivation to the idea of, as a team, we're going to have to sacrifice here, and we're going to have to give up our right to go party after the games.
It's the same thing with every business. I mean, for all the important, for you and your George, it's like, if you guys were to go, get COVID, our business would be negatively impacted immensely, right? So you guys do the right thing and and take care of yourselves. And I think that's the same. And I think that's where the disconnect is, and where I can see the point where folks are saying, hey, why I have to do this in my regular life? Why can't you do this as a professional? I see it, right? Because everybody else's business would tank if the most important people got sick and it was not necessarily out of an accident, but because of carelessness. And I think now what the NFL has done, which is good and which I think gives them a very good chance not only to have a season but to finish the season, is that they've taken it so that any and all COVID-19 transmissions would be out of carelessness and not out of a failure to plan. You know what I'm saying? Which I think is a good thing.
I also would throw in there, how many games does the NFL really have to play? So the only thing that matters, I think, this season, because there are no ticket sales to speak of, is the television money, right? So if the television money is all that matters, so I'm going to take it from a selfish standpoint. We need 17 Sunday night football games.
Yes, we do.
So let's say that in order to get for the NFL to get fully paid from Sunday night football, and I'm not making a statement about NBC because they may argue this point, so this is just my own thought. But for them to play 17 games, what if the league were divided back to AFC and NFC? The AFC plays week 1. The NFC plays week 2. AFC plays week 3, so that you've got a 2-week quarantine guaranteed built in between games, right? So now there would be 3 primetime games and 5 games split between Fox and CBS. Fox and CBS get the short end of the stick, but it's my scenario, so I get to do whatever I want to do. But because of the fact, even if somebody had coronavirus getting back on the airplane and you had to quarantine for 2 weeks, you may not get 14 days, you get 13 days out of it or whatever, but you could keep safe and you would have a 9-game season, 10-game season, whatever you wanted it to be. Maybe everybody plays opening weekend or whatever, but you would at least have enough to collect all of your television money by playing only 9 or 10 games each. And the players, I would think, would go, hey,
well,
that sounds all right to me. I don't know.
As one of 8 wide receivers that it made a Pro Bowl in a 9-game season, I feel like that you're a little biased.
I'm really good in those 9 games. You should see me as a broadcaster. You had
a Pro Bowl. Your second year was the strike shortened year when you guys only played 9 games, and it was one of your 3 Pro Bowl
what
years.
was the worst part about that, though, is that we ended up playing the Jets in the playoffs. So we went to the Super Bowl the year before. We were 7-2, which was, I want to say, second best record in the league.
Well, they went round robin that year instead of had the seeding and stuff.
So basically, the team that beat us in the playoffs under a 6-team playoff system would have never made the playoffs.
Yeah.
So we got beat by the Jets, who had the friggin' Freeman McNeil rush for 250-something yards, and I had a 80-yard touchdown called back. I'll never forget that game. But, from the standpoint that, it was just a weird year. But it didn't take away from the championship. I mean, the Redskins were the champions. If anything, they had a tougher road to go through that playoff system, because so many teams were in it.
Yeah, because there were more games because they allowed, what was it, like 10 or 11 teams in the playoffs each division? Yeah, that was an interesting time.
I think it was 8 each. I think there were 8 each. Yeah.
Yeah, and then in '87, the Washington also won the Super Bowl in a season that was shortened by a strike as well. So they've had they've lucked in there. The interesting thing about what you're saying here is I think what people are undervaluing when it comes to the NFL, in that travel is so much different than for baseball, right? Because you guys, at most, regular season, it's 8 trips, right, and it's less than 24 hours a trip. So like the risk associated with being in a different town and all that kind of stuff are really low, actually, relative to baseball, when it looks like you just have 25 players who are all bored for 3 straight days, And in your scenario, it just reduces it by a factor of 1/2, which is big.
Well, if you could bubble up the divisions,
I like this idea too. I think this is a good idea too.
I'm not worried about. You mentioned the travel thing. Okay, I get it. We've all traveled. When you travel, it's like when you're in an airport and you're like, yeah, actually my diet doesn't matter now. Like no matter what I eat in the airport, it doesn't matter. Or you're staying at a hotel and you look at the snack bar and you go, I normally don't eat M&Ms, but today I'm going to have an entire box. That mentality, I get it, and it hurts, certainly. But I'm just as worried about players at home on an off day when they're technically have free reign to do what they want to do. I mean, a lot of these guys are 20, 25. Like, I was 20, 25. I remember what that's like. So that worries me just as much. But if you could bubble the divisions, and then you maybe do something where, 8 weeks in, you swap and you have this, these 2 teams go to this bubble and these 2 teams go to that bubble. To me, that is how you could really guarantee.
But what if you didn't? Think about when I first came to Cincinnati, baseball was played where the Reds and the Dodgers had 24 games. Think about that. Think about all the brushback pitches that happened in 24 games. So by the end of the year, those 2 teams wanted to kill each other.
Right.
What if you make up, it doesn't matter, if you had a 12-game season with your bubble idea and everybody played everybody 4 times? Oh my gosh. I mean, it would be like the most interesting stuff in the world. And then you would have no idea. Like when we got to the playoffs, you wouldn't have any idea if the North or the South or the East or the West was better.
It would be kind of like college football, right? Where we don't know.
Like opening day on college football.
Like
I'm really kind of looking forward to, if we can get there, on our opening Thursday night broadcast.
100%.
I've never done a broadcast like that.
Yeah.
I've never gone in not having seen the team as it exists before we got there. At least you get some preseason, you get something. So it's going to be like the opening of college football.
We were talking about the total for that game. It's like 56.5, 54.5. Like, I can see a universe where no one can cover anybody. Like, the defensive back for Houston sees Tyreek Hill run for the first time, and it's like he's never seen a player run before. And the game
Pause real quick. That's just how it always is.
Yeah.
When
But even
Houston
more
is
than
trying
normal,
to cover
right?
someone.
Like, and Houston's defense stinks. But like, you get the throw over. Like, you get the game is 70. Like, gets to 70, it blows over the total. But I can also see it being like kind of sloppy play right away. Like, we have no clue. Like, we have no precedent for this.
Before we get into week 1, I have one more pitch on the schedules. So, college football, rest in peace for the fall. Okay. We're all starved for some good football. You know what they have in the NFL? They have really good games that sometimes don't make it to Sunday night, right? We're always sitting there, waiting for Sunday night, and there's this great game on the middle of the day. And we're like, man, I wish I could really sit down and watch this game. For example, week 1, Tampa Bay, New Orleans. Saturday night. Now, if there's no college football, I'll just remind, I think you know this, that Notre Dame, usually covered by NBC, look, there's an NBC crew that is free that could potentially have a Saturday night football game. So you could spread things out a little bit more, right? You'd have a game on prime time. You could even do 3 games in prime time on Saturday. You'd have way more. You could make more money than normal.
Well, assuming that, I mean, the only reason the NFL doesn't play Thursday, Friday, and Saturday
it's because of college.
is in high school.
Yeah.
Don't forget how important high school football is. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's just the tradition. And the NFL, that's the reason they play Thursday night and not Friday night.
Because or they play Saturdays in December after college football is over because of the.
It's actually like a law, right? It's like you'd have to get this change. You'd have to go to.
But think about how much fun the data is going to be for this stuff, because all these things are interconnected, right? You have what happens when you have one less day of rest. Well, it depends upon if you're a home team or you're a away team. What if there's no fans? Well, now how big is home field? Like all these like cool like data permutation questions are like there's going to be opportunity in this. I think it'd be a lot of fun from a DFS perspective. Like how much variance is there in a Sunday DFS slate when there are 3 less games? Consistently. It's just going to be a really if that's going to the outcome, and it does sound like from reports, if college football doesn't go ahead, and the SEC, ACC, Big 12, Pac-12 are all still up in the air, but
by the time people are listening to this, there'll be 7 new things.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, we don't know.
But like the uncertainty, I feel like is a fun data exercise for us to really understand the game, because I'm looking forward to seeing what is the value of fans. How much home field advantage do they give, and is it homogeneous across the league?
Yeah. Well, what do you think?
And now we have rest.
Chris? So what do you think? So all of these unknowns, there's no fans. How do you, going into a game, knowing, you have the Chiefs and the Texans, for example.
Yep.
How do those things play with respect to those 2 teams?
Well, it's interesting that those 2 teams are pretty much come back intact to some extent. Obviously
no DeAndre Hopkins,
Houston's missing DeAndre Hopkins, but but I think that they're going to be okay. To me, the ones that are really interesting is going to be change of coach, change of quarterback. How long does it take even a Tom Brady to get that going without practice? Tom Brady is calling different plays for the first time in his life. He's having to study and figure out. He and Gronk, instead of just a wink and a nod, now are going, blue whiskey Charlie, and they're going, oh, well, that means this in New England, and now you got to translate it from French to Spanish, in order to get it going there. But at some point, there's going to be this huge curve. Right, that's going to be, the new teams, the new guys suck early on, and then it's going to be like, oh damn, those guys are finally getting it, like the Bengals. You can make a case the Bengals are going to have a big time year where they've got all these receiving talents. They've got Joe Burrow. They've got at least one guy on the offensive line to make it work. So I think that there's, as far as a broadcaster, as far as interesting television, I think all of that makes it better than it's ever been. There's not there's no such thing to me in this season as chalk anything. Anything can happen in this year.
Well, and you think about it's also styles making fights, because Brady and Peyton Manning, if he was playing now, can you imagine just the anxiety he'd have that he can't spend the whole offseason with Reggie Wayne throwing the perfect timing passes? Whereas a guy like Rodgers, Mahomes, they're more improvisation quarterbacks. Maybe they're more resilient in times like this, and it's going to take the Derek Carrs and the sort of more rhythm guys half the season to be any good, and it's going to take more of the improvisation guys. Or when you look at the opt-outs around the league, you have a huge fraction of them are linemen. Right, so if you're a team and you maintained some of your size up front, either on offense or defense, do you do better against a team like Tennessee with a big running back? Right, there are all these interesting questions.
It's really interesting.
That I think will. I don't know, the fact, we're probably not even going to be able to solve all of them, but every single week there's going to be an interesting COVID-related sort of question to answer.
Yeah, but I've got, the one I want to ask about from you 2 guys, my 2 mathematicians here. You guys are geniuses. Have we now reached the point where we're possibly paying the quarterbacks too much money?
Oh, God.
And I think the Dallas Cowboys are trying to figure that out with Dak. Like, I went back, I just told you, I went back and I watched every PFF graded throw. There's 350, 320 something that he had on the season. So I watched every game. So I'm watching all this different stuff. And my conclusion was, he had a couple of bad days in there. He doesn't throw very well in the rain in New England. I know that. That was.
He got hurt against the
No one
Philly
does.
in the cold, and that hurt him badly too.
Yeah. So there was a couple of bad moments, but in my mind, he is almost the perfect balance of a guy who throws from the pocket, who can run read option designed runs, that can scramble, that can, that is smart. Has the charisma. Like, he has a really good blend of things. And I think he's still his fifth year or something. He's still young in the thing. I would have paid him, right? And I think what's happening is that some of these teams are starting to go, well, when Seattle had Russell Wilson on a rookie contract, and when Aaron Rodgers wasn't making $35 million a year, and, when Colin Kaepernick was on a rookie contract, when Lamar Jackson's on a rookie contract, Patrick Mahomes on a rookie contract, now all of a sudden these teams are going, Jared Goff's went to the Super Bowl on a rookie contract, that all of a sudden these teams are the ones that are getting there. And how many teams are sitting out there going, I wonder if we haven't reached that point now where it's too much, and because you give me $35 million, or let's say $30 million, the difference in a rookie contract and where they are now, $30 million buys a lot of grade A football players that fill in a lot of different positions.
Counterpoint, though. So for the Cowboys, with respect to the Cowboys, leave the other teams out of it for a second. We wouldn't be having this conversation if they just didn't buy the sound system before the TV, right? Like, they went and paid Zeke and DeMarcus Lawrence.
Yeah. Well, and also
and just forgot about the most important player on the team. And those two guys are gone, and they paid Dak. We don't notice.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing was Dak's rookie deal sort of bailed him out from a lot of bad contracts before. Like the Romo deal had ramifications. And Romo, got hurt, so we're not going to. But they weren't exactly like piling on money to take advantage of Dak's rookie deal the way that like Baltimore was, Kansas City was. Like, Kansas City bought Sammy Watkins for $16 million a year. He's a third receiver. He's a luxury, but you can do that when you have Mahomes. I think to your point, like, when you look at, let's say, the top 6 teams in terms of WAR generated by wide receiver, tight end, O-line, quarterback, Baltimore by a country mile, actually. Kansas City, Seattle, Atlanta, Dallas, Houston. 4 of those 6 teams quarterbacks on rookie deals. Atlanta spent a ton on offense and got a decent amount of value out of Calvin Ridley and some, but can't buy a break on defense. Seattle has the one quarterback that I think we all know can win even with lower round draft picks. But the thing that we don't realize is the floor bottoms out when you sign a quarterback to that big of a deal and it doesn't work. So look, the teams that did the worst in this, Pittsburgh, Big Ben, paid a lot, gets hurt. So, they can't even have offense. They have the best defense in the league besides New England last year, and can't win.
Can you believe?
In a weak AFC too.
How good could Pittsburgh be this year? They were pulling guys off the street and went 500 last year.
Yep.
So anyway, that's a different
So the second worst, Cincinnati, Andy Dalton paid a hefty sum for a quarterback who's, now the backup in Dallas. Carolina, Cam Newton gets hurt. Bottom falls out of that team. Washington paid Alex Smith a ton of money. He gets hurt. Bottom falls out of that team. And then you get up to the Jets, and the Jets are one where they leverage their future for Darnold. So they traded 4 picks for the right to take Darnold, and even though they're not saddled from a roster perspective because they paid Darnold too much money, they're saddled from a roster perspective both, I think, by bad decisions and the fact that they traded multiple picks to get their quarterback. So I think, to your point, if you sell the farm for a QB, I don't think the ceiling is as high as if you hit on a rookie quarterback.
Well, and
but the floor is extremely low, and that's what people are trying to avoid. And I think they missed the point there.
Yeah, you get the double whammy if you lose the other players because you're out of salary. And to your point, you're one injury away from having a train wreck of a season. I mean, I've never spent more time, and I was wearing you out. I was like, come on, man, figure this out. Thinking about that, and I kept looking at it from the Cowboys standpoint. And it was part of the reason I wanted to go back and study all those plays was I wanted to really form my opinion on it. And there's some other discussion points with this. I mean, you brought up Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott really was a non-factor in the passing game. I mean, when I went through all the key passes, the graded passes, I think he was on there twice of the whole season, which, I mean.
And somehow they were the most efficient passing team.
Yeah.
Right? Led the league in yards per play.
They got
pass play.
not much out of the tight end position, which generally, when you think about teams who are getting blitzed, and who beat them? Who made them look bad? A team like the New York Jets.
Yep.
Right? Who who blitz all the time.
And they
need a quick pass to the running back. They need a quick pass to the tight end. And that didn't really change for Dallas this year. They're going to have basically the same look.
Do you think that Kellen Moore, to your point, because I think one of the things that McCarthy's doing so well, I mean, he said that he had the money quote this week that said, I need to learn as much as anybody in this room, which I think is a really great way to say, look, like, I've been a successful head coach in the NFL, but Kellen's been successful too, as evidenced by an offense that was top 10 in the league in almost every metric. But do you think that, because when you look at Green Bay during his time, it was James, he took some really bad backs and made pretty efficient offense in the underneath game. James Starks, DeJuan Harris, and then Eddie Lacy, was he was a high draft pick, but he was a pretty good receiver. Like, do you think that he molds that offense into using Zeke? Because that's a pretty expensive back when only one or two of his plays are any sort of meaningful plays in the passing game.
And he's not even as good as Tony Pollard.
Wow.
You know what? I mean, it was late in the year. Tony Pollard was given a couple of opportunities.
He's really good.
And he doesn't know what he's doing. Okay, let me start there. So he was running routes, and he could get himself open. He scored a nice touchdown on one of them. But you can tell he didn't know how to read man zone. He didn't know whether to sit down or keep going. So, when somebody's really confused and instead of stopping or sprinting, they're kind of jogging. They didn't really know. But he has some real skills to him as well. But I want to get back to Kellen Moore just a little bit. To me, it's like we're all stupid at something, right? So Kellen Moore, when they played the New York Jets and Greg Williams just got them. He just got them. They weren't ready for it. They didn't do bunch formations. They didn't do picks. They didn't do anything. I mean, I was really impressed with Kellen Moore for the first half of the season. I was like, that was just bad. Okay. From that moment on, though, they had that figured out. Other teams that tried to blitz them, they bunched, they picked, they were doing a lot of things. So when you learn from mistakes, I think that's a pretty good indicator that you're going to have a good career.
Well, Jason Garrett maybe hung him out to dry. Who knows? I mean, so that's a really good point. Kellen Moore's young. He's super young.
Yeah.
When you're young, you just are oblivious to some of these things that you gain from experience. And you are thinking about all of the other stuff that you got to do for the first time, and you forget. It's like if you make something for the first time and you're like, forgetting every ingredient, you're reading it 6 times. The 5th time you make it, you're just in there, jamming. So if you have someone like a Mike McCarthy who can say, hey, by the way, Kellen, I played against this guy 500 times. Let's be ready for this. And then you have it. That's how that relationship can work really well, in my opinion.
Yeah, filling in the gaps. I totally agree. And Mike, Mike. I mean, he came by PFF.
He's fantastic.
He's a great guy. And he's not an ego guy at all. I mean, so will it bother him even a little bit if all of a sudden Kellen Moore becomes a hot coaching prospect? He'll love that.
But that has made a lot of head coaches struggle. And that's the thing, I think, when you look at great coaches in the NFL. Like, I remember back with, when Todd Haley was coaching the Chiefs, and the one year Charlie Weiss got Matt Castle into the Pro Bowl. And everybody's like, oh, look at, this is the answer, all this kind of stuff. Todd Haley got so fed up with that he pushed him out, right? And it's like, and then of course everything falls apart. You talk about Garrett, like Garrett's fingerprints kind of got on that offense after the first half of the season. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to, cast any dispersions on anybody's character, but I'm saying maybe there was a little bit of Kellen Moore's the next great thing. I need to make sure that I'm still part of this. And, I think the more you can avoid that, right, the more that you can give people responsibility and help them grow. It's why, like, you look at, Andy Reid's assistants are all great head coaches. They end up being, they're all coach of the year or something like that. And, there's a level of being obviously established enough and having some like self-awareness. But like if Mike McCarthy shows that, you look at this Dallas team, you talk about feedback, George, when you're a 12-4 team on paper and you go 8-8, that's a lot of feedback. Yeah. You're going in and you're saying to yourself, what went wrong? The worst thing that can happen to you is to be an 8-8 team like Seattle and finish 11-5, and you're spending the whole offseason just like, we don't have to change a thing. We just
always play away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that's why I'm so high on Dallas this year, because they look at last season, and if I'm looking at that, I'm saying to myself, if we don't do anything, we could finish 8-8 again. But if we do some small things, we're a 13-win team, especially in a division that includes, two really bad teams.
The Travis Frederick thing worries me a little bit, because they struggled in protection. When they struggled in protection, it was left guard last year. Some different people in there due to injury, whatever. And now you take away Frederick, who was not very good last year. I mean, he wasn't anywhere close to what he was. So now you've got a second offensive line spot. I think the tight end position, Blake Jarwin, I mean, when you watch him, he's great after he catches the ball. If he catches the ball, man, he's exciting. He can go do some things. He's still learning. He had a really good game against the Bears. I thought he looked good against the Bears. And the running back position, those are the things that bother me, those quick, easy throws.
What about the defense, though? Because I'm a little worried about their coverage. You lose Byron Jones. You're really hoping that some of your young corners can get it together.
How do you
Mike
know?
Nolan,
Mike Nolan's the guy.
He was the 49ers coach
I remember.
15 years ago.
My point being is that I think everyone sort of thinks this Cowboys defense has a lot of really talented young guys, and I could see them being an atrocious defense, like having to outscore everybody. Yeah.
And it's tough for them out of the gate.
McCoy's going to add a little something to them, though. I mean, to get Gerald McCoy in there.
Trayvon Diggs is a guy who.
Well, but you know nothing about Trayvon Diggs. I mean, he was amazing at Alabama, and it's
and it's hard for them out of the gate because they go to LA, which I'm not high on them, but like they could be a good offense. They got some smart people. Home to Falcons. Falcons have a good offense at Seattle. And then week 4, they have Cleveland at home. And I think Cleveland, like, it might be one of these teams where we're looking back right now and being like, their win total over is the biggest cinch of all time. And maybe they're not a 13-win team if you look at their first 4. I don't know.
Most teams aren't. I mean, to get back to your original question, though, paying the quarterback, not paying the quarterback, we always search for the one answer, and maybe that's the problem. There really isn't one, hey, this mold fits and you got to squeeze into this, and that's how you run your team. Having a great quarterback who you don't pay a lot of money, yeah, that's great. Is it something that you can do repeatably? No. If you find a great quarterback, are you better off paying him or trying to get another young guy that you pay cheaply? No, absolutely not. Pay Patrick Mahomes. Where I think
that's an easy one.
That's an easy one.
Let's go to the harder ones after that.
But that's the thing. So there's this middle ground where you go, I don't know that much about a guy, but I want him to be good so badly that I'm going to pay him too much.
Well, especially if you've drafted him highly. So Jared Goff, right? First overall pick. Is an organization, you want to have to pay him $100 million because you got it right.
Yep.
They go to the Super Bowl, the trajectory is this, and you got that. But now you pay him and you go, okay, there goes my guard, there goes my tackle, there goes my nose tackle, there goes my linebacker, and all of a sudden we win 8 games.
Yep.
Now, did Jared Goff change? Probably not that much. Did people catch up with that offense a little bit? Probably so. But how do you extrapolate out the meaning of we paid them, they're gone, and our team's not as good? Well, and that's a really hard equation for me to figure out.
You bring up such a great point about the sort of like the trophy that is we got to pay our number 1 overall pick quarterback.
Yes.
Because the last 2 quarterbacks who I think are bona fide starters in the league that failed to get a long-term deal were both 4th-round picks, Kirk Cousins of Washington and Dak Prescott of the Cowboys. And I do think that there's so much, like that's where I think you have to be careful about paying the quarterback because obviously if you're Washington, one of the reasons you didn't pay Kirk Cousins was it was kind of an admission of being wrong. Like you drafted RG3, you traded up for RG3. So, and took him, and all the while you took a guy who was better. Dallas wanted to trade up for Paxton Lynch, failed, and ended up with Prescott.
Still living in Johnny Football's shadow. To be honest.
So, but like the question, and it's all of these things. It's whatever you're talking about. You have to ask the question: am I doing this to elicit? Am I doing this because to justify something I did before? Or am I doing this to try to get something out of a play? Like, am I extending this quarterback to try to give him an extra confidence boost or something like that? Like, it's so hard not to inject these things. And I agree, there's a few slam dunks, Mahomes, Wilson, maybe Rodgers. But after that, it's really tough. And I do err on the side of going back in because there are enough teams in the league. I mean, look, the Seahawks gave 2 first-round picks, a starting player, and swapped picks for a safety. Imagine if one of these teams went in and said, "Hey, Jared Goff's available." Jay Cutler was available. The moment that Jay Cutler found out that Josh McDaniel was going after Matt Castle, he bailed. They knew they had to trade him, and he still got multiple picks from the Bears. Like, to me, like, that's, if a guy's just kind of Dalton-ish, I'm shipping him out for some picks.
I personally, and everybody has their own opinion, I personally would struggle with giving up first-round draft picks because, forget the player. Like, Jamal Adams is a great player. Yeah. I'm not arguing that at all. But, A, you got to pay him, right? If you're going to keep him, you got to pay him a lot. Yeah. And you're giving up cheap replacements. Yep. Like, I could draft 2 safeties, and I might hit on one. I still own a horse, but I should. But so I had a horse racing guy, a trainer, and we had a big group of people, and we're gonna put $75,000 in and buy a horse. We're all putting in $5,000 or whatever, and we're gonna buy one horse. And he said, "You guys are so stupid." And I go, "What are you talking about, man? We're trying to." He goes, "You should buy 3 $25,000 horses, and your chances of hitting one of those is so much higher than trying to find that 175." And to me, that's the way I would do it as well. I would be like, at the end of the day, if I were the Bengals, and I knew what I was going to come on with Joe Burrow, that I knew I was going to take Joe Burrow, I probably would have started unloading every veteran player I had, no matter how good they were, anticipating that I wanted to try and be good in years 2, 3, and 4, right? I'm going to give Joe 1 year to figure it out. I want to be good in 2, 3, and 4. So I want to start saving my pennies so that I want as many draft picks as I can, because I want all of them to get good together, like Seattle or one of those kind of things. But, I mean, everybody has their own strategy of how to do it.
So as an extension of that, though, then would you have been okay with trading back to 5 and taking Tua? Like, is the differential between Burrow and Tua enough to justify? Because there could have been a situation where you maybe got a 3-way trade going, or with Miami.
Yeah,
like
Miami. You pick up 2 more first rounders, 3 more first rounders.
Because in that way, like, let's say, like, the question I'm basically asking is, would you be okay with Tua and Jordan Love as opposed to over Burrow? Would you?
Ask me in 5 years. I mean, nobody knows, right?
What's your answer to that?
I would have done it.
You would have taken the 2 of them.
Not Jordan Love, but one of the quarterbacks that Jalen Hurts. I would have figured out a way to get Hurts.
Jalen Hurts is a whole other story. But my personal opinion is, quarterback might be the one exception of the rule. Like, we know there's 8 guys playing to go to the Super Bowl every year, right? I mean, those same 8 guys, it's never changing. So if I thought I had one of those, if I thought on draft day I had one of those 8, I'm not giving it up for anything. And I think that's what the Bengals did. I mean, you think about it, so I played in the 80s, and we went to the Super Bowl the only 2 times in franchise history. Clearly because of me, but it probably had something to do with, we had an MVP quarterback in 81, we had an MVP quarterback in 88, right? So if you have one of those, and I know Mike Brown believes that. I know Mike Brown believes basically as I do. If you have one of those 8, it doesn't really, you can screw up a lot of other stuff and get away with it. And so I probably would have, Burrow impressed me so much with how he got away from the pass rush. And he's going to get tested to the hilt on that this year. But I think he's a special guy.
Yeah, you can make a case with the injuries to Tua as well, that it wasn't, the differential is big enough. But it's a good question, right?
I think when you watch Joe Burrow play football like he did in his last year at LSU, you see the type of plays that at the NFL level, there's only 2 guys that make right now. I think Deshaun Watson may be creeping into that group with Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes, but there's only a handful of guys that make those types of plays. And so if I can get one of those guys, and I don't think Tua is one of those guys, then I would not give it up.
I think you make a good point, Chris, though, about the problem is that we still don't view football players as means to wins anymore. We still view them, and I think that there's a human element of it, but the Bears view Khalil Mack as a trophy. Like, we have an amazing football player on our team, and now it doesn't, like, to them, to us, it matters that they like leverage their entire future, and they're in one of the worst positions in the league right now to get that trophy, right? That player that's amazing. But like, no one, like, your view is looking at them as sort of assets, right? And they, you know, I don't care which of these 3 work. I need 2 of the 3 to work. And if the one that I picked first is the one that didn't, who cares? We're still winning football games. I don't think that's how people operate, though. I think that there's a ton of pride in in the choice of 1, 2, 3. And if 2 and 3 work and they win a Super Bowl, there's still like a little bit in their head saying, I failed here.
You know what the other part of this thing is, and I know the whole DeAndre Hopkins thing has made people scream this year. But when I look at that, and I don't think you can ever have a conversation about football that doesn't include money. So whatever DeAndre Hopkins is going to make, let's say $20 million a year, right? Somewhere in that category. So now, what do you have to replace that? You have 3 guys that run 4-3, basically, and you've got Randall Cobb. Now, Randall Cobb, to me, was the biggest surprise watching that Cowboys tape. How many times he was in key moments, and I know he had drops, and I know he had some other issues.
Maybe that's why they went 8-8.
But he was a reliable guy, and he got his butt kicked a couple times and held on to the ball. And we all know Deshaun Watson's going to be scramble around. He's going to take 60 sacks, but he's going to create some of the most magical plays we've seen all year, right? I mean, that's who he is. That's Russell Wilson's like that. I think Aaron Rodgers, to some extent, plays that in that same sort of way. So, and was it a bad deal when you take the $20 million for a receiver and the fact that you've got a guy from Dallas that basically you didn't pay anywhere close to that, and you've got 3 guys that run 4-3? You know, I don't know. And is it possible David Johnson comes back, you know, if he's anywhere close to what he was?
Cobb averaged more than 10 yards a target last year, despite dropping 9 passes. That's an efficient player.
I would push back on saying they took on a player in David Johnson that you would have needed to give me picks to take on, given his contract.
I understand that.
It's not as simple. I don't think it's as simple as saying, you know, they got rid of Hopkins, so it was, but there was a ton of, there probably was reasonable ways to get, you know, I think one of the ones that, you know, we had heard was that the average depth of target was down, but then you look, and one of their goals last year was clearly to get the ball out of Watson's hand faster, which is going to correspond to lower depths of targets for guys like Hopkins. But I do think obviously getting rid of Hopkins is a bad thing, but if they would have done something like what Minnesota did with Diggs, I don't think people would have given him as much flack, because, you know, I contend trading your best player is never a good thing, but if you can get several draft picks, including a number 1 for a non-quarterback, you probably did okay.
And you have to factor in, even if they're number 1 draft picks, you pay them so much less than you pay those veteran guys. I mean, and maybe I should have broadened the conversation out to quarterbacks and veteran superstars who are going to be $20 million or more. You know, is that the right formula in today's NFL to do that? Because, man, you start stacking $20 million contracts on top of each other, now you're down to 5 guys and a bunch of rookies, right?
That's what the Kansas City Chiefs are
I mean,
finding
we wrote about this and there's something I want to study over the next couple of weeks, but one of the things we studied right around the combine was when you look at defense, it's always like the fifth highest graded guy. How he does impacts the defense more than how the highest graded guy does. And that's, again, because offenses have so much freedom to attack your weaknesses. So when I look at a team like Kansas City, if Tyrann Mathieu were to get hurt, I don't think they could stop anybody, you know, because you could just literally go in and be like, well, now Sorensen's got to play 2 positions and he stinks at 1 position. Okay. And now look at their corners. We're both undrafted guys. Now and But there's I think a tie-in. If you could have a player who's a superstar that does multiple things well, right? Then I think you can change the calculus. But if I'm building a defense, I don't think I'm building it the way that Kansas City does with Frank Clark, Chris Jones, Tyrann Mathieu, and a bunch of guys that I don't know, man. I think if any one of their superstars get hurt, especially in the secondary, you got to score 35 to win every game.
All right, so now I have a question for George. Mr. 49er. You love your 49ers.
I do.
And that's great. I do too. I really like watching that team play. And the Shanahan family,
they're fantastic.
Mike was my coach at Florida.
Mm-hmm.
How about my offensive coordinators? Not my head coaches. I had Charlie Pell and Doug Dickey as head coaches. My two offensive coordinators that I had there, Mike Shanahan, Steve Spurrier.
Not bad.
That
Really?
ain't bad, right?
Not bad. That's
I
awesome.
learned some football from those two guys.
Yeah.
Shanahan was 26 years old at the time. We'd take him to the bars with us after the game. He'd get carded. We wouldn't. He was our coach. So that was the way that whole thing went down. But let's talk about one of the core concepts of PFF. Because for me, whether it's religion, politics, you've got to be able to stand on your pillars and take challenges. And you know me with PFF. You guys tell me something, I challenge you 100 different ways. Yep. So let's talk about the impact of the running game. Occasionally that gets translated as the running game doesn't matter. And we'll get into that conversation in a minute as well. But you're talking about your 49ers, who I've watched Kyle Shanahan coach. They do more work on the running game than any team I've ever seen. Any team I've ever seen. And they went to the Super Bowl, and I could make an argument they were the best team in the Super Bowl. Sorry about that, Eric. But that they were the best team.
They got jobbed.
They got jobbed. And I picked them, so I'm still a little bitter about the whole thing.
Yeah, see, at least I didn't do that.
Yeah. So that was bad.
Neither one of us got to really celebrate it, given how it happened.
You both lost money. You made money. I don't know what you did. So, all right, but let's talk about the running game itself and the impact on football, because clearly that's a team that is based on their outside zone concepts, running the ball, and their play action off of it. So now translate that for me into the meaning of the running game in the NFL, because not only the 49ers, but also the Titans are two run-first teams, and both made it to the Final Four.
Yeah. The first thing that I would point to is that the Niners, as impressive as their total rushing was at the end of the season, and people just couldn't stop citing it, they weren't that efficient from a per play running basis. They weren't. They were, I want to say they were 10th or 12th. 14th in terms of expected points added per run play, which kind of goes to show you see these big highlight runs at the end of games when they're winning, and you think, man, that's why they won the game. And in reality, they had to be winning in order for those highlight reel plays to be there. And I keep thinking back to that New Orleans game where that was the most impressive win of the season.
Clearly. And
they won it because Jimmy Garoppolo made throws. And that offense in the passing game was a top 5 offense throwing the football. And that's why they were successful offensively. Now, does it help that you can show teams a run concept and then play action off of it? Absolutely. But you don't have to be great at it. The data backs this up in order to run that play action. And they weren't great at it.
I look at it, the number one reason for me to use the running game is protection. Like when I look at the outside zone protection schemes, and there's half the league, right, is doing that. But because, and you guys are right, and I've actually used your line on the air before, that it doesn't matter, that play action works whether you're running the ball well or not.
By the way, quick aside.
Did I screw it up?
No. When you said that, we watch the games together, right?
Yeah.
Upstairs, we're working and sending stuff.
I popped the bottle of
I know.
champagne.
I get the invoice. I know.
I am doing somersaults. I'm doing cartwheels.
I got hot on Twitter that week too. People were like, "Oh, he's enlightened."
The analytics community. But the funny thing is, every other time, before that, when whether just because that's what you normally say or would say, establishing the run or whatever, I'd get a couple of DMs like, hey man, I thought you worked for this company. I thought you were helping out.
It takes a while. I'm a slow learner.
But anyways, yeah, you have used that, and I'm assuming I've talked to coaches about it too.
But you talk about, like, I watched Jared Goff's every one of his throws this past year too. And with that offensive line in LA that had a tough year, if you took away the outside zone play action and bootleg, there's no way they could pass protect. There's no way.
Right,
so now I look at the Cincinnati Bengals and I go, could that happen here? In other words, could just the idea of Mixon and the outside zone give him enough time? And then does it create a scenario where I can pay less for offensive linemen? Because it doesn't matter. If your offensive linemen start that stretch run play and the back's going that way and the quarterback's extending the ball, you have no choice as a defense but to go fill your gap, and your pass rush isn't getting there for at least 4 seconds.
Well, and that's one of the things that we built with our college to pro stuff, was trying to test that out. Like, how bad can a lineman be to be functional in a system where you run play action 40% of the time? Pretty good. They can be a sixth round
just
lineman.
As long as they're not as bad as what the Rams have.
Yeah, the 6th round lineman can be a 4th round value if you do all these things to protect the player. The issue, I think, the only issue I have, and I think one of the things that people like me and George just have to come to grips with, is there are inefficiencies in football. And no matter what, we were talking to Cliff Averill the other day, no matter what we say, it's probably going to be about 10 years before linebackers don't bite on play action again and anymore. Right? That's what they're taught. And they can say it all they want, but there's no data to suggest that they bite less when a team is bad at running the ball.
You know who was the first team that I really ever saw? 2 teams. Philadelphia, back in the day with Jim Johnson as the defensive coordinator, not Jimmy Johnson, the head coach of the Cowboys, Jim Johnson.
Jeremiah Trotter and all those.
Yeah, and I asked him one time, I go, you've given up 200 yards per game rushing the last couple of weeks. He said, I don't care. I go, what are you talking about? You don't care. He goes, you got to be able to stop the run and win football. I got it in my brain, right? He goes, no, you don't. He goes, what makes you think that? I goes, I just got to keep them from throwing it over my head and score touchdowns, right? The other team, the Kansas City Chiefs, last year.
Right. So the 2016 playoff game, you and Al did, when they played the Steelers, and Le'Veon ran for 180 yards on but they held him to 18 points and were in the game because it was I'd rather have Le'Veon Bell going 5, 6, 7 at a time than Big Ben and Antonio Brown against Terrence Mitchell all game. Yeah. There's a baiting. And I always thought Bob Sutton wasn't great at the end, but that was one thing I think he fundamentally understood. We have bad corners, and I can trick a team into settling for 5 yards of play when they can over the top of me for.
If Bob Sutton had the corners they had last year out there, they would have been fine.
Yeah.
And Tyrann Mathieu, and to be able to do, he was pretty amazing.
But there are inefficiencies in the game that I think we always say we always come from the idea of eventually these inefficiencies are going to get rolled out of the game because that's how all these.
That's my point. Okay, now you're all the way back to my reason for bringing this up to George. I think there are certain parts of football that have had it wrong for 1,000 years, however long we've been playing football, 100 years, that they've had it wrong. And the idea that you put these people up there, the extra person, if you will, in the box, is fundamentally flawed. That if you're what you should be protecting, and teams like the 49ers that have a great 4-man pass rush that can play 7 guys back there in the secondary, that's unbelievable, right? Whereas most teams feel like they have to stop the run.
That's the thing.
And so they're going to put the extra guy in there, so they're going to give up the big pass plays. So are we now beginning to get to that tipping point where people go, wait, let me think about this for a second.
Yeah. Maybe,
I would say that while we hope they're getting to that tipping point, I don't think we are.
Football is such a noisy game that I feel like we've made so many strides in a lot of ways. Think about 4th downs. The game, your Super Bowl, the last one, New England versus Philadelphia. If Philadelphia doinks on those 2 4th down plays, it probably sets football back a half a decade, don't you think?
Absolutely.
If Baltimore does it, and we even saw it last year. Baltimore's what? 18 for 20 or some crap on fourth.
And then the Titans come to town.
They donked the 2-1s in the playoff game against the Titans, and everybody's like, see, analytics don't work.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think that there's so much noise in football. You take a team like Seattle, right? Seattle is going to look at their last 2 seasons, 10-6, 11-5, and it was because they decided to go with the run game and bloody another team's nose and all this kind of stuff.
Play base on defense.
Play 4-3 base with no nickel. And it's like, no, you won for other reasons other than that. But like, you're one of 32, you're 3% of the league that's going to continue this sort of meme forward until you somehow hit bad variance, right? And meanwhile, there's another team like the Niners who, I will say, with the Niners and the Titans, you look at their schedules over the time when they were running the football the way they were and got all of us to fall in love with that. They were very simple schedules, right? And you're not the Rams. The hard part about the Rams, you talk about them, the reason like it got so tough for them in the middle of the season was they got behind. And it's so much harder to run those boot action things. Minnesota was another team, easy schedule, so they run a bunch of play action. Well, why? Because they're ahead by 7 the whole game.
And they didn't have Todd Gurley going 80 yards with screen passes anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, that one year was freaky. What he was
and
able to do.
that offensive line was insane that year.
But football schedules are short.
Rob Havenstein, what happened?
Yeah,
right.
I don't know.
No Roger Saffold.
Football games are short. Football schedules are short, and in short amount of time, anybody that's been at the blackjack for an hour, at table for an hour, and you know anything can happen. I feel like football
never happened to me. I don't know.
Football is that way where we chase after these things, and I think, and I do think that eventually the league becomes efficient, but it's way slower than I think the three of us would ever imagine.
Here's my thought on the Niners and why they've been successful while the Rams have kind of ground to a halt. To me, there's a diversity in the Niners offense that isn't there with a lot of these other run-first, play-action-heavy teams. Jimmy Garoppolo had one of the quickest time to throws in the NFL. They managed to run play action. They didn't take a ton of deep shots. They were massively efficient when they did, but they leveraged quick game. You know, their run game, it was outside zone, but they were like the only team in the top 5 in terms of outside zone and like pulling, man concepts, right? Like,
and reverses. I mean, they ran as many reverses in the Super Bowl.
Sure. Yeah, with Debo.
Yeah, but that's the other part of this thing is that you have to go all in. Like their receivers, whether it's Kittle or Debo Samuel or whatever, that those guys can block, right? Mm-hmm. They can come in there, and when you're playing those tight edges like the Rams and the 49ers and all these teams like to do now to get the crossing routes, but the blocking is a big thing. Then you add on top of it a running quarterback in Lamar Jackson, right? And I know I'm jumping teams, but now you've changed the math entirely. Yeah. So now as the league is starting to evolve away from that extra guy in the box, the Ravens are going, we're going to add a guy to our box because now our halfback is a blocking back for the quarterback instead of my quarterback turning around and handing off and cheering for the play, right? Now I've got an extra blocker. So the math of the running game, they completely altered. I was coaching high school football over at Highlands High School, and I was like, I never thought about it. So in big moments of the game, we would run a quarterback sweep because it added one guy to the blocking, and you could double team the end, you could pull a guard, you could do things that you couldn't do. And so you wonder, can the Ravens, is it just because they're like a one-off team? And it's so hard to get ready, like the old 46 defense of the Bears, and it's just impossible to get ready for in a week? Or will the whole league catch up to it? Or will the whole league start to do it like the Buffalo Bills or something like that?
Well, we've shown that like the more unique your scheme is, however we measure it, though, you have a better chance of covering the spread in the betting market. Like it's just harder for teams, whether it's offense, it's a little less so for defense, but the more unique your scheme is, it was always the thing with the Broncos when they had Tebow. It's like, Tebow stinks. How the heck is this happening? It's like, well, it takes an extra couple seconds to think about, it's Tebow week, right? And we always, in high school football, we always had it's this school that runs 4 wide receivers week, right? And now you got to play 2 small guys who never play, and now they got to play dime for your team.
Did you ever play safety ever?
Yeah,
I played safety for a little while. And when I was coaching high school stuff a little bit, we were playing this team that runs all this misdirection and all this stuff. And you just sit back there and you watch it. You go, I have no idea where the ball is. As a coach, I had no idea where the ball was. It could have gone one of three, or the quarterback could have been handing. But when your defense starts going sideways and it starts getting they're not attacking. Like defensive guys are cavemen. They're cavemen. They just want to take their club and beat somebody over the head. And when you get them running sideways, they look like fools out there.
Yeah, just thinking. I mean, that's the thing. Like for us, the school is named Hill Murray. It was the one team that ran 4 wide receivers, and so we always had like their package. But like you got to learn that in a week, right? And you got 2 backup defensive backs that never play, and then now all of a sudden you got them on the field. It's the same thing with the Ravens. Now the third linebacker for every team is a backup. It's the 4-3 base is no. So if you can get the other team putting their third linebacker on the field, not only can you exploit them in the run game, you can exploit them with tight ends in the pass game. And there's something to that. The hard part is, like we've always said this about a number of different players, was Kaepernick this way, was Vince Young was the one, like his first year in Tennessee, we're all thinking like, is this going to revolutionize offensive football? Like the only question I have about something like that is, if the rest of the league's going to replicate it, is Lamar Jackson a singular player in terms of athleticism and what he does on the football field? And if Lamar Jackson is a singular player, how sustainable is it? Because it's tough, right?
But here's my theory. All right, I'm just going to lay this on you. Okay, what if I rotated quarterbacks every 5 years? I took a guy in the first round, so I got a 5th-year option on him. I'm going to keep all my star players, and at the end of 5 years, Lamar, maybe not Lamar because he's pretty damn good, but most guys, I'm going to rotate through that system one more time, but I'm going to have a unique enough system and I'm going to load up on my defense because I've got all that extra money. I just think that right now football is more interesting to me now than it ever has been. And it is in part because of Lamar Jackson. For the first time ever, a team went all in on an option playing quarterback, a running playing quarterback. And what they discovered was that not only did it change the math on blocking schemes in the run game, it also changed the math when teams had to stop that. So now you get all these quick, fast wide receivers out there, and they're running one-on-one routes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now what? He can certainly throw it well enough to. I think he led the league in touchdown passes last year.
Mark Andrews running just wide open down the seam.
Yeah.
They didn't put any money. I mean, their offense. So last season, even though the Chiefs had a quarterback on a rookie deal, they spent about $80 million on offense. It was about the same as actually Seattle spent. Baltimore spent less than $50 million on offense. So when you look at defense and how unstable it is, the way that you can kind of get around that maybe is to just load. Like you traded for Marcus Peters. Brandon Carr's never missed a start since 2008 as a corner in the NFL, which is amazing.
Go get Calais Campbell this year.
Yeah, you have Earl Thomas. You have Chuck Clark, who we always talk about like Jamal Adams being the pass rusher. Chuck Clark led the league in pass rushes by a safety last year. And then you had Tony Jefferson for a time. You had Tavon Young, who's kind of in the mix. Like they're kind of like, we think of defense as being unstable, which I think it is. But if you spend 2/3 of your salary cap on it, maybe you can avoid that. The thing, not only did they bought into a quarterback who runs, but they also bought into, like, they don't have much of any talent on the outside other than Hollywood Brown, right? Like Willie Snead's playing snaps for them.
Well, yeah, and he's got a screw in his foot.
Yeah.
So I mean, we'll see. It's worth noting. I mean, look, the Titans made them look kind of.
They played the fewest
foolish
number of snaps from behind, and we saw what happened. Like an offense like Chiefs with Mahomes is always going to be more resilient when you're behind, as we saw in the playoffs, than like the Ravens. We're gonna have to see Lamar Jackson in a lot more of like the feature space in football, but it's interesting to see the approach they're taking. I agree with you. I think the fact that you look at the way teams like the Niners, the Ravens, the Chiefs, like all these great teams all did it differently last year, and at the same time, it comes back to passing efficiency, and they were all the most efficient passing teams in the league. So really interesting stuff.
This has been a blast. It's taken us a decent amount of time, but I do have some quick hitting questions for you.
There we go.
Chris. You're preparing for week 1.
Yes.
Okay. We've talked a lot about, or not us, but it's been talked a lot about how, you and Al go out to dinners, on the road. Are you guys just going to do takeout, delivery?
Drive through?
Because I have an idea.
Wow.
George has a food related
I have a pitch.
We need ideas.
I have a pitch for you.
Okay.
the restaurant business is struggling.
Clearly.
I know how devoted you and Al are to the restaurant business, as am I. It's
Yes.
a large part of my life. Could help as you go around the country, could help shed some light on some restaurateurs that are doing a bang-up job delivering food to the hungry people of that city. Get the film crew.
Trying to see how George folds himself into
Have
this.
him, look, I'm willing to
He'll be eating well at the end of this story. I just don't know how
I will
we're doing
play any
this.
role possible. You go pick up the food, you highlight the restaurant, maybe you show some behind the scenes stuff, and then you just get a little, film you guys eating for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Makes its way in there, you get a joke or two, and you're doing some good, and you could call it like Sunday Night Eats.
Well, this is what NBC would describe it as. They would describe it as a 30-second commercial for which they could get $700,000 or whatever it is. Right? Every time one of us happens to mention
George, what commission are you taking?
Yeah, right.
a good restaurant or someplace we like, they go, if we could have done that ourselves, we would have made whatever they're making.
Well,
It's the number one show on television. It's insane.
Let me tell you what. There's a couple companies that deliver food that must be doing well, maybe like an Uber Eats, that I'm sure would love to sponsor that. So
Hey, you go find a
I'm
$700,000
just saying.
commercial, and I promise you, I will get an audience for you.
The
at
only thing
NBC.
George needs is more work. So congratulations.
I'm really just finding a way to get good free meals. That's my main
We
goal.
do pretty well in the press box, though.
This
we,
is
we,
true.
we eat pretty well up there. We do.
What is the game that you're most looking forward to right now?
Oh my God! You always ask me these. I'm going to tell you an honest, pathetic truth about me. Everybody I guarantee you. Can you name our whole Sunday night football
No, I
schedule?
can't.
I can't tell you who we're doing. Let me think. If I think really hard, I know we do Thursday night and we do Sunday night. I know those. And our next game is. I don't
Here's
even
a
worry
game.
about it. I don't even think about it.
This leads to my question because here, how many teams deep into the league could you get before? Like, let's say, okay, Chris, do you have the Washington football team on your schedule?
No,
And you would say
no.
no. And how many teams could I ask you that and you would get it right?
Oh, I would get the ones that we don't do
have. Okay.
because I'm doing broad studies on this. I mean, we do the same thing every year. We've got like 17 teams that we do, right?
Yep.
And so then there's 15-ish teams that I can't tell you anything about. When I come in here and talk to you guys, I'm like, God, tell me anything about the Jets. I don't know anything. I haven't seen a Jets game forever. I see them indirectly on tape playing the teams that I'm going to get ready to play, right? And so, but, you guys can go through. I'm always amazed. I listen to you guys, Steve and Sam and Mike and Austin and all you guys, and it's like you rip through names of players, like da 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 da. And I don't really study like that. It's like I memorize the names of the guys during the course of the week of the film study, but I'm trying to find unique things. When I'm studying tape, I'm trying to find something that I haven't heard anybody else talk about. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a release or whether it's the tight end, how they play jam coverage or how they do that trap coverage or, because Freddie, unlike other broadcasts, they'll take, like I was always a little jealous of John Gruden because they would take, they had a 20-minute opening on camera and they would show highlights of things that John had seen on film for 20 minutes. And so I was like, Freddie, we should do that. That would be a great he goes, find it live. Then you're something special.
Yeah.
If you can find it live, I'll put it in there. But I'm not taking a game from last week nobody cares about. You find it in this game. Son of a bitch. And it's like, okay, but at least if you study, now I know I've got to know something ahead of time before I get to the game so that hopefully I can see it again or something new else that's new, that comes in there. Like it's really, the Patriots are by far the most frustrating team to do because whatever you're watching on tape, that's not what they're doing in your game, right? I mean, it's always new.
So when you talk to Bill, are you like, hey, can you give me something? I know my film study has done nothing for me. Just help me out.
Bill is either the absolute worst guy to deal with in a production meeting or the absolute best. He is the most extreme, I have had conversations about details of the Patriots with him that have been otherworldly. I mean, you get some idea of how in depth the knowledge of that man is in some of these conversations. And I don't use him on the air. I mean, he'll talk about player, is he worth paying him or not paying him? And I mean, he is a little salty language too, so I'm always kind of giggling a little bit with him anyway. And then there are times that you would think he hates all of us, like all of us. You don't ever talk to me again, kind of thing. We flexed into a Sunday night road game. Oh, I thought he was going to crush us. I mean, he was so mad, it was unbelievable because he didn't want to disrupt his schedule, right?
Is there ever a tell? Is it like this Patriots team is so good and has so much left in the tank that he can give me some nuggets, or a team that's like maybe holding on a little, like last year's team where they're kind of not, like the game you had against Houston where they're just kind of overmatched, Baltimore they're overmatched. Is he less loquacious in those times, or
has nothing to do with it?
There's nothing there.
Has nothing to do with it. It's just like sometimes it's a Super Bowl. He's been fantastic with us at Super Bowl. So
happy to be there.
I can't explain it. I can't. He's not the only one. Like I had a guy from the New York Times call me before the Super Bowl between the Patriots, which was, they've been in every Super Bowl I've ever called, in Seattle. And they said, and the question was, tell me the difference dealing with Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick, right? And I said, they're about the same. And this guy went crazy. I was like, get out. Chris, come on. How long have I known you? You can open up. You can tell me off the record. I was like, man, I'm telling you, they are just about the same. I go, some things they talk about, and it's really interesting, and some things, if I had a gun to their head, they wouldn't be talking about. And it's pretty much across the board. But the difference is, Bill doesn't care what anybody thinks about him. Like, he just doesn't care. So, like, Pete Carroll, I think, wants to maintain a certain image and be a positive guy with the media, and he'll, make an effort, and he'll say it in a way, but he'll say the same bunch of nothing that Belichick does. He'll just do it with a smile on his face. The worst one was Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells was 100% the worst, because Bill would come in, hey, how you guys doing? Hey, da, 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 da. And he would talk about his horse that ran at the, Saratoga. And then he would talk about baseball with Al Michaels. And then he would go around the room, Freddie, you remember we did the thing, da, da, da. And he'd look at his watch and go,
Time's up.
Gotta go, man. I look at my notepad, I hadn't written one thing down. And so I finally started going, I go, he'd start that crap, and I go, Bill, no, we're not doing this again. We are not doing this again.
That's a great story to end on. This has been fantastic. We'll have to have you on again.
Hey,
sometime. We got to make
it's hard
use
to get
of this
on
place.
this show. You guys are, it's tight. There's a lot of celebrities on
We'll
this
put
show.
you in touch with our guy, Matt Stopsky.
Don't put Stopsky on me, man. Stopsky's the only guy I can't say no to. He would literally wear me out. I'm like, finally, what is it, just a 6-hour podcast, Stopsky? Sure, I'm in. Just stop texting me. Leave me alone.
Look, Chris, I got you for a full day here. No, Matt.
No catering. Sorry, though. You'll have to figure that out on your own.
He's tough.
All right. Cris Collinsworth, thank you very much.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.